The silence that followed was deafening. 12 of the world's most elite marksmen stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the distant target through high-powered binoculars. The electronic confirmation system had spoken with cold digital certainty. Direct hit, center mass, 2,847 meters. What made this moment extraordinary wasn't just the impossible distance or the brutal weather conditions that had defeated every other shooter that day. It was the person holding the rifle, a 24-year-old woman who barely weighed 95 pounds, whom they had mockingly nicknamed Mouse just hours earlier. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let me tell you how the most underestimated person in that frozen wasteland of northern Alaska became the only one to achieve what seasoned warriors thought was impossible. The Kodiak Island Training Complex sits like a fortress of steel and concrete against the relentless Alaskan wilderness, where temperatures plummet to -30 degrees Fahrenheit and winds howl across the tundra with the fury of Arctic demons. This facility, hidden from civilian eyes and protected by multiple layers of military security, serves as the ultimate proving ground for the world's most elite precision shooters. Here, where normal humans would struggle simply to survive, the finest snipers from 6 different nations gather once every 3 years to test the absolute limits of human marksmanship. The facility itself is a marvel of military engineering, built to withstand the harshest conditions on Earth. Massive heated buildings house sophisticated equipment worth millions of dollars, while reinforced observation towers stretch skyward like metallic monuments to precision warfare. Between these structures lies the crown jewel of the complex, a shooting range that extends nearly 3 miles across the frozen landscape, marked by targets positioned at increasingly impossible distances. On this particular February morning, as dawn struggled to penetrate the thick gray clouds that seemed permanently welded to the sky, something unprecedented was about to unfold. The annual International Long-Range Precision Challenge had drawn its most competitive field ever assembled. American Delta Force operatives who had made confirmed kills in the mountains of Afghanistan stood alongside British SAS legends whose exploits remained classified decades after their missions, German GSG-9 specialists hardened by countless counter-terrorism operations, shared equipment tables with Israeli Shaytet 13 operators whose precision had become the stuff of military folklore. But among these titans of marksmanship walked someone who seemed utterly out of place. Maya Rodriguez moved through the facility like a shadow, her slight frame almost disappearing among the towering figures of elite warriors. At 5 feet 1 inch tall and weighing barely 95 pounds, she looked more like a college student who had wandered into the wrong building than someone who belonged at the world's most exclusive shooting competition. Her official role was listed as equipment specialist on the facility's daily roster, a generic title that covered everything from ammunition preparation to scope calibration. She wore the same standard-issue cold weather gear as everyone else, but on her small frame, the heavy Arctic clothing seemed to swallow her whole. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail that disappeared beneath her fur-lined hood, and wire-rimmed glasses perched on her nose gave her an almost scholarly appearance that drew smirks from some of the assembled warriors. The morning briefing took place in the main equipment hall, a cavernous space filled with the world's most advanced precision rifles. Barrett M82s, Chaytak M200s, and custom-built rifles worth more than luxury cars lined the walls in organized rows. The air hummed with the quiet confidence of men who had spent years perfecting their craft under the most dangerous conditions imaginable. Colonel Harrison Blake, a 30-year veteran whose chest displayed ribbons from conflicts spanning 4 decades, commanded the room with the natural authority of someone who had earned respect through blood and sacrifice. His weathered face bore the permanent squint of a man who had spent countless hours staring through rifle scopes and his voice carried the gravitas of someone who understood that precision shooting was often the difference between life and death. "Gentlemen," Blake began, his words cutting through the morning stillness like a blade, "today's challenge will test every skill you've developed throughout your careers. We've positioned targets at distances that would have been considered impossible just 20 years ago. The final target stands at exactly 2,847 meters, nearly 2 miles away. Weather conditions are brutal, with crosswinds gusting up to 40 miles per hour and visibility hampered by intermittent snow squalls." He paused, letting the magnitude of the challenge sink in. "In your operational careers, you've all made shots that saved lives and completed missions under impossible odds. Today, we discover who among you can push the boundaries of human capability even further." As Blake continued his briefing, Maya quietly worked in the background, methodically inspecting rifle after rifle with the focused attention of a surgeon preparing for a critical operation. Her movements were precise and economical, each action purposeful and deliberate. She tested trigger mechanisms, cleaned optical systems, and verified ammunition compatibility with the careful attention to detail that separated true professionals from amateurs. Staff Sergeant Tommy "Tank" Morrison, a massive man whose nickname reflected both his size and his direct approach to life, noticed Maya working nearby and couldn't resist commentary. At 6 feet 4 inches and weighing nearly 250 pounds, Tank had spent 8 years with Marine Force Reconnaissance, where his confirmed kills in Iraq and Syria had earned him legendary status among his peers. "Hey there, little mouse," Tank called out with a grin that was more condescending than friendly. "You sure you can handle equipment that heavy? Some of those rifles weigh more than you do." The comment drew chuckles from nearby shooters men, who saw Maya's small stature as inherently incompatible with the serious business of precision shooting. In their world, physical presence often translated to credibility, and Maya's appearance suggested someone who belonged in a library rather than on a battlefield. Captain Eric Larson, a Norwegian Special Forces veteran whose pale blue eyes reflected the coldness of Arctic warfare, added his own observation. "Someone should probably warn her that those scopes aren't for taking Instagram selfies. One wrong adjustment and she could ruin months of calibration work." More laughter rippled through the group, the kind of casual dismissal that Maya had experienced countless times throughout her life. In environments dominated by larger-than-life personalities and impressive physical specimens, she had learned to blend into the background, to work quietly and efficiently while others grabbed attention and credit. But there was one person in that room who saw something different. Master Chief Petty Officer Samuel "Ghost" Williams, a Navy SEAL whose 23 years of service had taken him to every conflict zone on the planet, observed Maya with the careful attention of a predator studying potential prey. Ghost had survived 2 decades of the most dangerous missions imaginable, not just through shooting skill, but through his uncanny ability to read people and situations. What Ghost noticed was subtle but significant. When Maya handled the rifles, her grip was perfect, not the awkward fumbling of someone unfamiliar with firearms, but the natural, automatic positioning of someone who had spent serious time behind a trigger. Her finger placement, the way she shouldered each weapon, the manner in which she sighted through scopes, every movement suggested muscle memory developed through extensive training. "You ever notice," Ghost murmured quietly to his teammate, Petty Officer Jake "Reaper" Thompson, "how she handles those weapons? That's not equipment maintenance technique. That's shooter positioning." Reaper, whose own reputation for precision had been built through 6 combat deployments, followed Ghost's gaze and studied Maya more carefully. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." After a moment, he nodded slowly. "You're right. The way she's checking those trigger pulls, testing the balance points, she's evaluating them like someone who knows what to look for in a precision rifle." But their quiet observations were drowned out by the continuing commentary from other shooters who saw only Maya's size and apparent youth. The mockery had taken on a life of its own, with each comment building on the last until Maya had been effectively dismissed as little more than a technician playing with equipment she couldn't possibly understand. Captain James "Hawk" Patterson, a British SES veteran whose mustache was as legendary as his shooting ability, gestured toward Maya with theatrical concern. Someone ought to assign her a spotter just to make sure she doesn't hurt herself. These aren't toys, you know. Real weapons require real operators. The laughter grew louder, and Maya's cheeks flushed slightly, but she continued her work without responding. Her silence was interpreted as shyness or intimidation, further reinforcing the group's perception of her as someone who didn't belong in their elite circle. What none of them understood was that Maya's quiet demeanor masked a depth of experience that would have shocked them into silence. Her military record, if they had possessed the security clearance to access it, would have revealed a different story entirely. But those files were buried so deep in classified databases that even most generals would never see them. The morning progressed with increasing levels of preparation and anticipation. The world's most advanced shooting equipment was arranged on tables like a precision instrument museum. Custom ammunition, hand-loaded by master gunsmiths, sat in carefully organized rows. Electronic wind measurement devices worth more than most people's cars calculated atmospheric conditions down to fractions of degrees and humidity percentages. Maya moved through this high-tech environment like a ghost, continuing her methodical inspection of equipment while the elite shooters engaged in the kind of competitive banter that preceded serious contests. They shared stories of impossible shots made under combat conditions, compared equipment preferences developed through years of operational experience, and analyzed the challenging conditions they would face during the day's competition. The facility's main shooting range stretched across the frozen Alaskan landscape like an enormous ruler laid across the tundra. Targets were positioned at carefully measured intervals, beginning with relatively close shots at 800 meters and extending in 200-meter increments to the final challenge at 2,847 meters. At that distance, the targets appeared as mere specks even through high-powered optics, requiring shooters to compensate for bullet drop, wind drift, atmospheric pressure, temperature variations, and a dozen other variables that could turn a perfect shot into a complete miss. Weather conditions added another layer of complexity that would test even the most experienced marksmen. The Alaskan wind was notorious for its unpredictability, changing direction and intensity without warning. Snow squalls could suddenly reduce visibility to near zero, then clear just as quickly to reveal perfect shooting conditions. Temperature fluctuations affected ammunition performance in subtle but critical ways that required constant recalculation of firing solutions. As the official competition began, names were called in order of seniority and previous performance rankings. Each shooter approached the firing line with the confidence that came from years of training and combat experience. These were men who had made impossible shots under the most dangerous conditions imaginable, who had saved lives and completed missions through their precision and skill. The first shooter was Captain Morrison, whose powerful frame seemed designed for handling heavy rifles. He took position behind a massive Barrett M82, a weapon that fired .50 caliber rounds capable of penetrating armored vehicles. The rifle's thunderous report echoed across the range like a cannon blast, and spotters immediately called out the result through radio communications. Miss, high and right, approximately 15 meters. Morrison's expression remained stoic, but those who knew him could see the frustration in his eyes. The extreme distance had revealed the limitations even experienced shooters faced when pushing the boundaries of human capability. One by one, elite marksmen took their turns at the impossible distance. Captain Larson, whose Arctic warfare experience should have given him an advantage in these conditions, saw his shot sail wide left by nearly 20 meters. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, a veteran of precision shooting competitions across 3 continents, watched his carefully aimed round strike low and left of the target. Each miss was met with professional acceptance but growing concern. These were not amateur shooters making beginner mistakes. These were the finest marksmen in the world, men whose skills had been proven under the most challenging conditions. Yet the extreme distance was revealing the outer limits of human precision. Captain Patterson approached the firing line with characteristic British composure, his mustache perfectly groomed despite the harsh conditions. He spent nearly 10 minutes calculating his firing solution, consulting electronic weather instruments and making minute adjustments to his scope settings. His shot, when it finally came, was met with tense silence as spotters studied the target through powerful optics. Miss, close but still off target by approximately 8 meters. The pattern was becoming clear. Even the world's elite shooters were struggling with conditions that pushed every aspect of their training to its absolute limit. The combination of extreme distance, challenging weather, and the psychological pressure of competition was proving too much for even these exceptional warriors. It was at this moment of growing concern that Colonel Blake made an announcement that surprised everyone. "We have one final rifle on the table that hasn't been assigned a shooter." The designated marksman from the German team was injured during yesterday's cold weather training exercise and has been medically disqualified. He gestured toward a pristine rifle that sat untouched on the equipment table, a custom-built precision instrument that represented the absolute pinnacle of German engineering. "Rather than let this exceptional weapon go unused, I'm opening the opportunity to anyone present who would like to attempt the shot." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken thoughts. None of the elite shooters wanted to volunteer for what was beginning to look like an impossible challenge, especially with a weapon they weren't familiar with. Making a public attempt and failing would damage reputations that had been built over years of successful operations. It was Tank Morrison who broke the silence with a suggestion that was half joke, half challenge. "Hey, why don't we let the little mouse try it? Might make for an interesting story to tell back home." The suggestion was met with renewed laughter. But there was an edge to it, now the kind of nervous humor that emerged when serious people faced serious challenges they weren't sure they could meet. The idea of Maya attempting the shot that had defeated the world's best marksman struck them as absurd, even entertaining. "Come on, Mouse," Tank continued, his voice carrying the false encouragement of someone who expected to be amused by the result. "You've been handling that equipment all morning. Time to see if you actually know what to do with it." Other voices joined in, turning the suggestion into a chorus of encouragement that was really mockery disguised as support. They saw Maya's potential attempt as comic relief, a moment of levity in what had become a surprisingly challenging day. "Go ahead, give it a try," called out Captain Larson. "What's the worst that could happen? You'll miss by the same margin as the rest of us." "Might as well," added Captain Patterson. "At least if you miss, nobody expects anything different." The comments continued, each one reinforcing their perception of Maya as someone who was fundamentally out of her depth. They saw her small size, her quiet demeanor, and her civilian contractor status as automatic disqualifications from the serious business of precision shooting. But Maya surprised them by standing up from the equipment table where she had been working. Her movement was fluid and purposeful, lacking the hesitation or nervousness they expected from someone about to attempt something far beyond her capabilities. "I'll take the shot," she said quietly, her voice carrying across the sudden silence that had fallen over the group. The words were simple, but they carried an undertone that made Master Chief Williams study her more intently. There was no bravado in her voice, no false confidence or nervous excitement. She spoke with the calm certainty of someone making a professional decision. Colonel Blake raised an eyebrow, perhaps reconsidering his casual offer now that someone had actually accepted it. "Miss Rodriguez, are you certain?" This is an extremely challenging shot under difficult conditions. There's no shame in. I understand the conditions, Maya interrupted politely but firmly. I'd like to attempt the shot. The assembled marksmen exchanged glances that mixed amusement with curiosity. This was unprecedented, a civilian contractor. A woman who looked like she belonged in a college library rather than on a military shooting range, volunteering to attempt a shot that had defeated some of the world's most experienced snipers. Maya walked toward the unused rifle with steps that seemed to grow more confident with each pace. The weapon was a masterpiece of German precision engineering, a custom-built rifle that had been designed specifically for extreme long-range shooting. Its barrel was perfectly balanced, its trigger mechanism adjusted to fractions of ounces, and its scope calibrated with mathematical precision. As she reached the equipment table, Maya paused and opened a small case that she had carried with her throughout the morning. From inside, she withdrew a single bullet that immediately caught the attention of everyone watching. Unlike the standardized military ammunition that filled the other shooters' magazines, this round was visibly different, older, with distinctive markings that suggested specialized manufacturing. Ballistics expert Dr. Kenneth Hoffman, a civilian contractor whose job was to ensure ammunition consistency across all weapon systems, leaned in for a closer look, and his expression immediately changed from casual interest to genuine puzzlement. "Excuse me," Dr. Hoffman said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades studying ammunition technology, "but that appears to be specialized match-grade ammunition. The markings suggest it was manufactured for very specific applications." Maya simply nodded, offering no explanation for why she possessed such specialized rounds or where she had acquired them. The ammunition in question bore markings that indicated it had been produced for precision shooting applications that went far beyond normal military requirements. The manufacturing date codes suggest this ammunition is several years old. Dr. Hoffman continued, his professional curiosity clearly aroused. Anyone still carrying rounds like these would have had to acquire them through very specific channels. Again, Maya offered no explanation. She simply loaded the single round into the rifle's chamber with movements that were smooth and practiced, suggesting familiarity with the weapon system that seemed impossible given her supposed role as a civilian equipment technician. The watching marksmen were now paying closer attention, their earlier amusement beginning to mix with genuine curiosity about who exactly this quiet young woman might be. There were details about her preparation that didn't align with their assumptions about her background and experience. Maya began her preparation routine with methodical precision that immediately caught the attention of anyone who understood serious shooting. Rather than relying on the sophisticated electronic weather measurement devices that other shooters had used, she employed techniques that seemed almost primitive by comparison, but demonstrated a deeper understanding of environmental factors. She observed the movement of snow across the ground, noting how the wind patterns changed at different elevations above the tundra. She studied the behavior of smoke from the facility's heating systems, watching how it drifted and dispersed to understand air currents that electronic instruments might miss. Her eyes tracked the movement of fabric on distant flags, calculating wind speeds and directions at various points along the bullet's planned trajectory. From her equipment case, she withdrew a small notebook filled with handwritten calculations, complex mathematical formulas that covered atmospheric pressure compensation, temperature effects on ammunition performance, altitude adjustments for the thin mountain air, and trajectory calculations that took into account dozens of variables that could affect the bullet's path. Sergeant Morrison couldn't resist commenting on her apparent rejection of modern technology. "What's all that pencil and paper stuff? We've got $15,000 ballistic computers that can calculate all those numbers in seconds." Maya looked up briefly from her calculations, her expression patient but focused. "Computers are excellent tools," she said quietly, "but they can only work with the data they're programmed to consider. Sometimes the most important variables can't be measured electronically. Her response surprised them with its sophistication. This wasn't the response they expected from someone who was supposedly out of her depth. The marksmen exchanged glances that suggested their easy assumptions about Maya might need reconsideration. As Maya continued her preparation, Master Chief Williams moved closer to observe her technique with the intensity of someone who recognized professional competence when he saw it. What he observed made him increasingly certain that Maya was not what she appeared to be. Her body positioning was textbook perfect, spine aligned to minimize fatigue, breathing controlled and rhythmic, weight distributed to provide maximum stability. When she shouldered the rifle, every aspect of her stance demonstrated training that went far beyond civilian shooting courses or amateur competition. "Jake," Williams whispered to his teammate, "look at how she's setting up. That's not recreational shooting technique. That's military precision shooting, and it's been practiced until it became automatic." Reaper studied Maya more carefully, his experienced eye cataloging details that supported Williams' assessment. The way she's adjusting that bipod, her cheek weld on the stock, even how she's positioned her non-firing hand, everything about her setup suggests extensive formal training. But their quiet observations were overshadowed by the continuing commentary from other shooters who remained focused on Maya's apparent unsuitability for the challenge she was undertaking. The incongruity between her appearance and the situation seemed to blind them to the professional competence that was becoming increasingly evident to those who knew what to look for. Maya spent nearly 15 minutes in preparation, far longer than any of the previous shooters had taken. But rather than appearing indecisive or overwhelmed, her extended preparation suggested someone who understood exactly how many variables needed to be considered for a shot of this complexity. She checked and rechecked her calculations, made minute adjustments to her scope settings, and positioned herself behind the rifle with movements that seemed almost ritualistic in their precision. When she finally settled into her firing position, something subtle but significant changed in her demeanor. The nervous energy that had seemed to emanate from Maya throughout the morning disappeared completely, replaced by a stillness that was almost supernatural in its completeness. Her breathing became so controlled that it was barely visible, her body position so stable that she seemed to become part of the rifle itself. Through the high-powered scope, the target appeared as barely more than a dark smudge against the white background of snow and ice. At 2,847 meters, even the slightest deviation in aim would result in a complete miss, while environmental factors could push the bullet dozens of meters off course despite perfect technique. The assembled marksmen fell silent as they realized that Maya was actually going to attempt the shot. Their earlier amusement had been replaced by genuine curiosity about what would happen next. Even those who remained convinced that she would fail were interested to see just how badly she would miss. Maya's preparation continued with microscopic adjustments that demonstrated an understanding of precision shooting that seemed impossible for someone with her supposed background. She made tiny corrections to her scope settings, adjusted her body position by fractions of inches, and controlled her breathing with the discipline of someone who had been trained to make shots under the most demanding conditions, the wind across. The Alaskan tundra was gusting unpredictably, creating conditions that would challenge even the most experienced shooters. Temperature variations affected ammunition performance in ways that required constant recalculation of firing solutions. The extreme distance meant that even the slightest error in judgment would be magnified into a significant miss. But as Maya settled into her final firing position, something became clear to the observers who understood advanced marksmanship. This wasn't someone hoping to get lucky with a random shot. This was someone preparing to execute a precise, calculated engagement based on extensive training and experience. Her final adjustments were made with the confidence of someone who had performed similar calculations hundreds of times before. When she closed her eyes briefly, it wasn't from nervousness or uncertainty. It was the kind of mental preparation that elite shooters used to achieve the perfect psychological state for maximum precision. The silence that had fallen over the shooting range was profound, broken only by the constant howl of Arctic wind across the frozen landscape. 12 of the world's most elite marksmen watched with growing fascination as the small woman they had dismissed as irrelevant prepared to attempt something they had all failed to achieve. Maya opened her eyes and settled her cheek against the rifle stock with movements that had clearly been practiced thousands of times. Her trigger finger found its position with automatic precision. Her breathing fell into the controlled rhythm that serious shooters used to minimize movement during the critical moment of firing. Through the scope, she could see the distant target with crystalline clarity, though it remained almost impossibly small at the extreme range. Every calculation she had made, every environmental factor she had considered, every minute adjustment she had performed, all of it came together in this single moment of absolute focus. The watching marksmen held their breath without realizing it, their professional curiosity overriding their skepticism as they prepared to witness either an embarrassing failure or something remarkable. In the profound silence of the Alaskan wilderness, with the wind temporarily paused as if nature itself was waiting, Maya Rodriguez prepared to change everything these elite warriors thought they knew about precision shooting. Her finger began its slow, steady pressure on the trigger, following techniques that had been drilled into her through training, so intensive that most people couldn't have endured it. But that training, and the experience that had followed it, remained her secret, a secret that was about to be revealed through one perfect shot that would redefine everything. The moment stretched into eternity as Maya's finger completed its steady pressure on the trigger. The rifle's sharp crack split. The Arctic silence like thunder, its echoes rolling across the frozen wasteland in waves that seemed to go on forever. The massive weapon bucked against her shoulder with tremendous force, but her small frame absorbed the recoil with practiced ease, her body moving as one fluid unit with the precision instrument. Then came the weighting. At a distance of 2,847 meters, it would take the bullet nearly 4 seconds to reach its target, traveling through air so cold it could freeze exposed skin in minutes. 4 seconds during which 12 elite marksmen held their breath, their eyes glued to high-powered spotting scopes and electronic monitoring equipment that would determine whether this impossible shot had found its mark. The silence was absolute. Even the notorious Alaskan wind seemed to pause, as if nature itself was waiting for the verdict. Electronic targeting systems processed data at lightning speed, calculating the precise point of impact while human spotters strained their eyes through magnified optics to witness what many believed would be another spectacular miss. Then the confirmation came, transmitted through speakers with digital precision that left no room for doubt or interpretation. Target confirmed. Direct hit. Center mass impact at 2,847 meters. Zero deviation from bullseye. The words hung in the frigid air like crystallized breath, each syllable penetrating the consciousness of every person present with the force of a physical blow. For several heartbeats, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The announcement seemed impossible, a malfunction of equipment or misreading of data, because what they had just witnessed defied everything they understood about the limits of human capability. Captain Morrison was the first to break the paralysis, grabbing his binoculars and focusing them on the distant target with trembling hands. Through the powerful optics, he could see the unmistakable evidence, a perfect hole punched through the exact center of the target, positioned with surgical precision that would have been impressive at 500 meters, let alone nearly 3 times. That distance. That's impossible, he whispered, his voice barely audible above the renewed howling of wind across the tundra. Nobody makes that shot, nobody. But the electronic systems were unforgiving in their accuracy. Multiple verification protocols confirmed the same result from different angles and measurement systems. The shot hadn't just hit the target, it had struck the absolute center with a precision that represented the theoretical maximum of human marksmanship capability. Captain Larson lowered his spotting scope with movements that seemed mechanical, automatic, as if his mind was still processing what his eyes had witnessed. The wind conditions alone should have made that shot impossible. The bullet dropped at that distance. The temperature effects on ammunition performance. There are too many variables to calculate perfectly. Dr. Hoffman, the ballistics expert whose job was to understand the physics of projectile flight, stared at his instruments with the expression of someone whose fundamental understanding of reality had just been challenged. According to every calculation I can make, that shot should not have been possible under these conditions. The margin for error at that distance is measured in fractions of inches, and environmental factors should have created deviation far beyond what any human could compensate for. Maya remained in her firing position for several more seconds, her breathing still controlled and rhythmic, her body maintaining the perfect stillness that serious precision shooting required. When she finally lifted her head from the scope, her expression was calm and professional, showing none of the excitement or triumph that might be expected from someone who had just accomplished something extraordinary. She cleared the rifle's chamber with practiced efficiency, engaged the safety, and carefully set the weapon back on its bipod legs. Her movements were economical and purposeful, displaying the kind of automatic weapon handling that came from extensive training and constant practice. There was no celebration, no acknowledgement of the stunned silence that surrounded her, just the quiet competence of someone who had executed a difficult task successfully. The assembled marksmen began to emerge from their shock, their professional minds struggling to process what they had witnessed. These were men who had spent decades perfecting their craft, who had made shots under combat conditions that most people would consider impossible. Yet they had just watched someone they had dismissed as irrelevant accomplish something that exceeded their collective capabilities. Master Chief Williams was the first to fully grasp the implications of what had occurred. His 23 years of experience in the most demanding operational environments had taught him to recognize genuine expertise when he saw it, regardless of the package it came in. The shot Maya had just made wasn't luck or coincidence, it was the result of training and experience that went far beyond anything a civilian contractor should possess. That wasn't beginner's luck, Williams said quietly to his teammate, his voice carrying the certainty of hard-earned experience. Nobody develops that level of precision without extensive formal training, military training, combat training. Reaper nodded slowly, his own understanding beginning to crystallize around the evidence he had been observing throughout the morning. The way she handled the rifle, her preparation technique, even how she positioned herself for the shot, everything about her approach suggested someone with serious operational background. But their quiet analysis was interrupted by the arrival of vehicles that nobody had expected. 3 black SUVs with government license plates were approaching the facility at high speed, their tinted windows and aggressive driving suggesting official business of the highest priority. The vehicles came to a stop near the shooting range with military precision, and their occupants emerged with the purposeful movement of people accustomed to dealing with classified situations. The lead figure was immediately recognizable to anyone familiar with military command structure. Brigadier General Patricia Hawkins carried herself with the authority that came from 30 years of service in the most demanding assignments the Army could offer. Her uniform displayed ribbons from conflicts that spanned multiple continents, and her steel-gray eyes held the focused intensity of someone who had commanded operations where success or failure was measured in lives saved or lost. Behind her walked a smaller entourage of officers, whose presence suggested that whatever was happening had attracted attention at the highest levels of military command. A colonel from military intelligence, a major from Special Operations Command, and a civilian whose expensive suit and careful demeanor marked him as someone from one of the alphabet agencies that operated in shadows most people never saw. General. Hawkins surveyed the shooting range with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to evaluating tactical situations quickly and accurately. Her gaze moved from the assembled marksmen to the equipment tables to the distant target, taking in details. That would help her understand exactly what had transpired here. "I need to speak with Maya Rodriguez immediately," she announced, her voice carrying across the range with command authority that brooked no discussion or delay. The use of Maya's full name created another moment of stunned silence among the marksmen, who had spent the morning dismissing her as an irrelevant technician. The fact that a general had arrived unannounced, specifically to speak with someone they considered barely worth noticing, suggested complexities to the situation that none of them had imagined. Maya looked up from the rifle she had been securing, her expression shifting from professional calm to something that might have been resignation mixed with wariness. She had clearly recognized General Hawkins, and the recognition carried implications that were not entirely welcome. "General Hawkins," Maya replied quietly, standing with movements that seemed to carry weight beyond her slight physical presence. "I wasn't expecting to see you here. I wasn't expecting to receive reports that you had emerged from retirement to set new marksmanship records at a classified facility," Hawkins replied, her tone carrying both authority and something that might have been concern. "We need to talk, now." The exchange confirmed what the more perceptive observers had begun to suspect. Maya's background was far more complex than her current role suggested. The arrival of high-ranking military officials, specifically to speak with her, meant that her true identity and experience were matters of national security significance. Colonel Michael Sterling, the intelligence officer who had accompanied General Hawkins, stepped forward with a tablet computer that displayed classified information accessible only to individuals with the highest security clearances. His expression was serious as he began reading from files that most of the assembled personnel would never be authorized to see. Maya Elena Rodriguez, age 24, formerly designated as Operational Asset Whisper 7 under the Department of Defense Special Access Program, codenamed Silent Thunder. Sterling read, his voice carrying the weight of information that had been buried under multiple layers of classification. Active service period from March 2019 through September 2022. Operational deployment locations classified. Mission records sealed under national security protocols. He paused, looking up at the assembled marksmen whose expressions reflected growing understanding of the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. Confirmed long-range eliminations attributed to Whisper 7 include targets at distances exceeding 2,500 meters under combat conditions. Number of successful operations classified. Mission success rate classified. Identity and service record officially expunged upon program termination. The information hit the elite marksman like a series of physical blows. Maya wasn't just someone who could shoot well. She was someone who had been trained and deployed by programs so classified that even their existence was officially denied. The casual dismissal they had shown her throughout the morning now seemed not just wrong, but dangerously naive. Captain Patterson removed his trademark cap and ran his fingers through his graying hair, his usual confidence replaced by something approaching awe. Silent Thunder was real. We heard rumors in the service, whispers about operators who could make impossible shots, but command always denied the program existed. The program existed, General Hawkins confirmed, her tone making it clear that she was revealing information that few people were authorized to know. It was developed to handle situations where conventional military action was impossible or inadvisable. Operators were selected based on capabilities that went far beyond normal sniper training. They worked alone, often in denied territory, where mission failure could have catastrophic consequences. Maya remained silent throughout this revelation, her expression carefully neutral as details of her past were exposed to people who had no security clearance to hear them. But her silence carried its own weight, the quiet dignity of someone who had served in ways that could never be publicly acknowledged or rewarded. Dr. Hoffman, still struggling to reconcile the physics of what he had witnessed with his understanding of ballistic limitations, found his voice. The shot she just made, that wasn't just exceptional marksmanship. That required understanding of factors that most shooters never encounter. Environmental compensation at that level, ammunition performance under extreme conditions, psychological preparation for single-shot scenarios where failure isn't an option. Whisper 7 operators were trained to make shots that would be considered impossible by conventional standards, Sterling confirmed. They operated in environments where there was no opportunity for ranging shots, no backup, no extraction if missions failed. Every engagement was a single-shot scenario where success or failure could affect thousands of lives. The weight of this revelation settled over the shooting range like the Arctic cold, pervasive, penetrating, changing everything about how the assembled marksmen understood what they had just witnessed. Maya hadn't just made a difficult shot. She had demonstrated capabilities that represented the absolute pinnacle of human precision shooting, under the most demanding conditions imaginable. Tank Morrison, whose own combat experience had given him deep respect for genuine military capability, approached Maya with an expression that mixed apology with newfound respect. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology. We all do. We made assumptions based on appearances, and we were completely wrong." Maya looked up at the massive sergeant, her expression softening slightly. "No apology necessary, Sergeant. I understand why you made the assumptions you did. That was the point of the program, to develop operators who could blend into any environment without attracting attention or suspicion." Her response demonstrated grace under circumstances where many people would have felt justified in expressing anger or resentment. But it also revealed something else, the quiet professionalism of someone who had learned to separate personal feelings from operational requirements. Captain Larson, whose own special operations background had taught him to recognize genuine expertise, shook his head in amazement. The precision required for that shot, we're talking about calculations that would challenge computer systems. You did all of that manually, with handwritten notes and visual observation of environmental conditions. Computer systems are excellent tools, Maya replied, echoing her earlier comment, but now with context that gave it entirely different meaning. But in operational environments, you can't always rely on electronic equipment. Sometimes the most sophisticated instrument you have is your own training and experience. The truth of her statement resonated with every combat veteran present. They had all experienced situations where technology failed, where survival depended on fundamental skills and hard-earned knowledge that couldn't be programmed into machines. General Hawkins had been observing this exchange with the careful attention of someone evaluating a delicate situation that had implications far beyond the immediate circumstances. Her next words were chosen with the precision that came from decades of dealing with classified operations and their consequences. The Silent Thunder program was terminated not because of operational failures, but because of political changes that made such operations difficult to authorize, she explained. To the assembled personnel, operators were given new identities and quietly transitioned to civilian careers. Their service records were classified to protect both the individuals and the methods they had been trained to use. Maya's presence at this facility, working as a civilian contractor, now made perfect sense. It was exactly the kind of anonymous position that would allow someone with her background to maintain a low profile while using technical skills that complemented, but didn't reveal her true capabilities. But her decision to take the shot, to demonstrate abilities that she had clearly intended to keep hidden, suggested circumstances that had pushed her beyond her normal operational security protocols. Something about the morning's events had motivated her to reveal capabilities that she had worked carefully to conceal. Master Chief Williams, whose own career had involved classified operations that he could never discuss publicly, understood the weight of what Maya had sacrificed by taking That shot. By demonstrating those capabilities, you've blown your cover. Your ability to work quietly in the background is compromised now. Maya nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. I understood the consequences when I decided to take the shot. But sometimes circumstances require difficult choices. What circumstances? General Hawkins asked, her tone carrying both authority and genuine concern for someone who had served at the highest levels under the most demanding conditions. Maya was quiet for several moments, her gaze directed toward the distant target that still bore evidence of her perfect shot. When she finally spoke, her words carried the weight of experience that few people would ever understand. For the past year, I've watched elite operators struggle with long-range precision shooting under challenging conditions. I've seen mission failures that could have been prevented, casualties that didn't need to happen, because current training protocols don't adequately prepare shooters for the extreme scenarios they encounter in modern operations. She paused, choosing her words carefully. This morning, watching some of the world's finest marksmen fail at a distance that operational requirements sometimes demand, I realized that my obligation to remain anonymous was outweighed by my responsibility to help improve training methods that could save lives. Her explanation revealed the depth of thought that had gone into her decision. This hadn't been an impulsive choice or a moment of wounded pride. It had been a calculated decision based on professional assessment of training deficiencies that could have life or death consequences in operational environments. Dr. Hoffman leaned forward with the intensity of someone whose scientific curiosity had been thoroughly aroused. The techniques you used for environmental compensation, those aren't taught in any military curriculum I'm familiar with. Where did those methods come from? Silent Thunder operators developed techniques through trial and error in operational environments, Maya replied. When you're making shots where failure means mission compromise or civilian casualties, you learn to read environmental conditions in ways that go beyond standard training. The assembled marksmen listened with growing fascination as Maya began to explain methods that had been developed through necessity in the world's most demanding shooting environments. Her knowledge represented not just individual expertise, but collective wisdom accumulated through operational experience that had never been formally documented or shared. Colonel Sterling consulted his tablet again, accessing files that contained information about operational successes that had never been publicly acknowledged. The shot you just made, it's consistent with confirmed engagements attributed to Whisper 7 in operational theaters. Same precision, same environmental compensation, same single-shot success rate. Maya neither confirmed nor denied the assessment, maintaining the operational security, discipline that had been drilled into her through training that few people could have endured. But her silence was itself confirmation for anyone with the experience to understand what it meant. The Arctic wind had intensified as the afternoon wore on, creating conditions that would have made precision shooting even more challenging than it had been during Maya's successful engagement. The fact that she had accomplished her shot during a brief lull in the weather now seemed even more impressive, suggesting an understanding of environmental timing that went far beyond theoretical knowledge. Captain Patterson, whose own extensive combat experience had taught him to recognize genuine expertise regardless of its source, shook his head in continued amazement. The psychological pressure alone, knowing that everyone expected you to fail, that your reputation would be damaged by a miss. Most people couldn't handle that level of stress and still perform with precision. Silent Thunder training included extensive psychological preparation, Maya replied. Operators learned to perform under pressure that made training scenarios seem manageable by comparison. Personal reputation was always secondary to mission success. Her response revealed another layer of the training that had prepared her for operational environments where failure could have consequences far beyond individual embarrassment. The ability to perform under extreme psychological pressure was as important as technical shooting skills in determining mission success. As the implications of Maya's revealed background continued to sink in, the assembled marksmen began to understand that they had witnessed something far more significant than an exceptional display of marksmanship. They had seen a demonstration of capabilities developed through programs and training that represented the absolute pinnacle of human precision shooting under operational conditions. The frozen Alaskan landscape around them suddenly seemed less like a training facility and more like a stage where something historically significant had just occurred. Maya's single perfect shot had not only demonstrated extraordinary individual capability, it had revealed the existence of training methods and operational expertise that could revolutionize how precision shooting was taught and implemented across military forces worldwide. But even as the magnitude of what had occurred became clear, Maya remained focused on the practical implications of her decision to reveal her capabilities. Her cover was blown, her anonymous civilian life was over, and she now faced choices about how to use abilities that could no longer be hidden from the world. 3 weeks after the shot that shattered every assumption about human limits, something extraordinary began happening at military training facilities across the globe. Instructors at the Army Marksmanship Unit in Fort Benning discovered detailed training manuals left on their desks, written in precise handwriting that outlined techniques they had never encountered in decades of teaching the world's finest shooters. The documents contained knowledge that seemed to bridge the gap between theoretical perfection and operational reality. At the Marine Scout Sniper School in Quantico, range masters found comprehensive guides that addressed the specific challenges their students faced when transitioning from controlled training environments to unpredictable combat situations. The materials covered environmental reading techniques that went far beyond standard meteorological instruments, psychological preparation methods for high-pressure scenarios, and ammunition selection criteria that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Similar discoveries occurred at specialized facilities in 12 different countries. The British SAS training compound in Hereford, the German KSK headquarters in Call, the Canadian Joint Task Force facilities in Dwyer Hill, and elite training centers from Norway to Australia all received the same anonymous gift, knowledge that had been earned through operational experience in the world's most demanding environments. Every manual bore the same simple inscription at the bottom of the final page: "Precision saves lives. Train like lives depend on it, because they do." The timing of these deliveries was no coincidence. Word of Maya's demonstration had spread through the tight-knit community of elite marksmen faster than classified information should have traveled. Stories of the impossible shot grew with each telling. But the core facts remained unchanged. A young woman who had been dismissed as irrelevant had accomplished something that challenged the fundamental understanding of human capability. Major David Chun, chief instructor at the Army's Prenger Sniper School, studied the manual that had appeared on his desk with the fascination of someone discovering a treasure map. The document contained solutions to training problems that had frustrated military instructors for decades, presented in language that was both technically precise and practically applicable. "These aren't theoretical concepts," he explained to his assistant instructors during their morning briefing. "Every technique described here shows evidence of field testing under real operational conditions. Whoever wrote this has solved problems we're still struggling with in controlled training environments." The manual section on extreme range environmental compensation was particularly remarkable. It outlined methods for reading atmospheric conditions that utilized natural indicators available in any environment, rather than relying on electronic equipment that could malfunction or be unavailable during critical missions. The techniques were sophisticated enough to produce accuracy levels that had previously been achievable only under laboratory conditions. Sergeant First Class Maria Santos, a veteran instructor whose own combat experience spanned 3 continents, found herself particularly impressed by the psychological preparation methods outlined in the anonymous materials. "This isn't just about making difficult shots," she observed. "This is about maintaining peak performance under stress levels that would break most people. The mental training described here is more advanced than anything we currently teach." The psychological techniques were indeed revolutionary. They addressed the specific mental challenges that operators faced when making shots where failure could result in mission compromise, friendly casualties, or civilian deaths. The methods combined meditation practices with stress inoculation, training that prepared shooters to perform under pressure that exceeded anything they would encounter in conventional training scenarios. But perhaps most remarkable was the section dealing with what the manual called single-shot environments, situations where operators had only one opportunity to achieve their objective, with no possibility of follow-up shots or mission adjustment. These scenarios required a level of precision and mental preparation that went far beyond normal sniper training, yet they were becoming increasingly common in modern military operations. The manual's author clearly understood these challenges from personal experience. Every technique was described with the kind of practical detail that could only come from someone who had faced such situations repeatedly and successfully. The knowledge represented years of operational learning compressed into documents that could revolutionize how precision shooting was taught and implemented. Meanwhile, at the Kodiak Island Training Complex where Maya's demonstration had occurred, profound changes were taking place. The facility's commanding officer, Colonel Blake, had made the unprecedented decision to preserve the rifle Maya had used exactly as she had left it. The weapon was placed in a specially constructed display case in the facility's main corridor, positioned where every person entering the building would see it. The accompanying plaque was simple but profound, in recognition that true capability often comes in unexpected forms. Excellence speaks through results, not assumptions. The display had become an unofficial pilgrimage site for military personnel from around the world. Elite marksmen would make detours during training rotations just to see the rifle that had achieved what many considered impossible. But more importantly, they came to understand the lesson that Maya's demonstration had taught, that preconceptions, based on physical appearance or assumed background, could blind them to extraordinary capability. Staff Sergeant Morrison, whose initial mockery of Maya had evolved into profound respect, found himself frequently standing before the display during quiet moments. The experience had fundamentally changed how he evaluated people and situations, forcing him to confront assumptions that he had carried throughout his military career. "I've been thinking about how many times I might have dismissed someone who could have taught me something valuable," he confided to Master Chief Williams during one of their conversations. "How many opportunities for learning did I miss because I made judgments based on appearances rather than capability?" Williams nodded thoughtfully. His own extensive experience had taught him to recognize expertise regardless of its packaging, but even he had initially underestimated the depth of Maya's capabilities. "The lesson goes beyond individual interactions," he replied. "It's about creating environments where genuine expertise can emerge and be recognized, regardless of who possesses it." The conversation reflected discussions taking place throughout the military community as news of Maya's demonstration continued to spread. Training protocols were being reevaluated, instructor selection criteria were being expanded, and recruitment practices were being examined to ensure that potential was recognized, regardless of its external presentation. Dr. Hoffman had spent weeks analyzing the ballistic data from Maya's shot, trying to understand how she had achieved accuracy that seemed to violate the physical limitations of long-range precision shooting. His conclusions had forced him to reconsider fundamental assumptions about what was possible under extreme conditions. The environmental compensation she achieved wasn't just exceptional, he explained to a gathering of ballistics experts from multiple military services. It represented an understanding of atmospheric physics that went beyond what our computer Models can calculate. She was reading environmental conditions and making adjustments based on factors that our instruments can't measure. His analysis had identified techniques that could improve accuracy for all precision shooters, not just those operating at extreme ranges. The methods Maya had demonstrated for reading wind patterns, temperature gradients, and atmospheric pressure. Variations could enhance training programs across the entire spectrum of military marksmanship instruction. But perhaps the most significant impact of Maya's demonstration was occurring in places far from military training facilities. At universities where ballistics engineering was studied, professors were revising curricula to include techniques that bridged the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical application. At equipment manufacturers, designers were developing new instruments based on principles that Maya's success had validated. The ripple effects extended into civilian shooting sports as well. Competitive precision shooters began studying reports of her techniques, trying to understand how manual calculation methods could produce results that exceeded what sophisticated computer systems achieved. Shooting instructors at civilian schools found themselves explaining concepts that had previously been confined to classified military training programs. Maya herself had vanished from public view as completely as she had originally blended into the background at the Kodiak facility. Some reported seeing a young woman matching her description, working with anti-poaching units in remote African wildlife preserves, where her precision shooting skills were being used to protect endangered species from well-armed criminal organizations. Others claimed to have encountered her at high-altitude training facilities in remote mountain regions, where she was reportedly teaching meditation and breathing techniques to help shooters achieve the perfect mental state for maximum accuracy. A few insisted they had seen her providing technical consultation to law enforcement, tactical teams facing urban scenarios where extreme precision was required to avoid civilian casualties. But these were unverified sightings, rumors that circulated through communities where her story had become legend. What was certain was that she had chosen to return to anonymity, using her revealed capabilities to help others, while avoiding the attention and recognition that her demonstration had earned. The decision reflected the same quiet professionalism that had characterized her response to the mockery she had faced at Kodiak. Maya had never sought recognition or vindication. She had simply recognized a situation where her knowledge could make a difference and had acted accordingly, regardless of personal cost. General Hawkins had made several attempts to locate Maya for official debriefing and possible return to active service, but the same skills that had made her an effective covert operator now enabled her to avoid detection when she chose to remain hidden. Her ability to blend into any environment remained as sharp as her marksmanship skills. The general's efforts had revealed the extent to which Maya's anonymous contributions were impacting military training worldwide. Intelligence reports indicated that the techniques outlined in her training manuals were being implemented at facilities across multiple continents with measurable improvements in shooter performance and mission success rates. She's having more impact on military effectiveness through her anonymous teaching than most generals, achieved through decades of official service, Hawkins observed during a classified briefing on the situation. Her decision to reveal her capabilities at Kodiak has triggered improvements in training methods that will save lives for years to come. The assessment was accurate but incomplete. Maya's influence extended beyond technical training improvements to fundamental changes in how military personnel evaluated capability and potential. Her demonstration had challenged assumptions that went to the heart of military culture, forcing leaders at every level to reconsider how they identified and developed talent. At the Kodiak facility, the annual precision shooting competition had been renamed the Maya Rodriguez Memorial Challenge, honoring not just her exceptional demonstration, but the lesson it had taught about recognizing excellence regardless of its external presentation. The competition's new format included evaluations that went beyond traditional marksmanship tests, to assess environmental reading skills, psychological preparation techniques, and the kind of holistic understanding that Maya had demonstrated. Participation in the renamed competition had increased dramatically, with elite units from around the world sending their finest marksmen to test themselves against standards that Maya's demonstration had established. But more importantly, the competition now attracted participants who might previously have been overlooked due to physical appearance or unconventional backgrounds. The first female winner of the competition after Maya's demonstration was Corporal Jennifer Park, a 22-year-old Army medic whose small stature and quiet demeanor had initially led to skepticism from more experienced shooters. Her victory, achieved through techniques clearly influenced by Maya's training methods, drove home the lesson that exceptional capability could emerge from unexpected sources. Captain Patterson, whose British Reserve had been thoroughly shaken by Maya's demonstration, found himself reflecting on the broader implications during quiet moments at his own training facility. "We spend so much time looking for warriors who fit our preconceived notions of what effectiveness looks like," he mused to a colleague. "How much potential talent are we overlooking because it doesn't match our expectations?" The question had become central to recruitment and training discussions throughout military services worldwide. Traditional selection criteria were being supplemented with assessment methods that looked beyond physical characteristics to identify the mental attributes and technical potential that Maya's success had proven could outweigh conventional advantages. The changes were particularly significant in sniper selection programs, where physical requirements had historically favored larger, stronger candidates who could handle heavy equipment and endure demanding field conditions. Maya's demonstration had proven that technique, mental discipline, and environmental understanding could compensate for physical limitations in ways that fundamentally challenged traditional selection criteria. At specialized schools where the world's finest precision shooters were trained, instructors began incorporating meditation and psychological preparation, techniques that had previously been considered unconventional or unnecessary. The mental training methods outlined in Maya's anonymous manuals were producing measurable improvements in student performance under stress conditions that simulated operational environments. The technical aspects of her training methods were equally revolutionary. Her techniques for manual environmental calculation were being integrated into curricula that had previously relied heavily on electronic instruments. Students were learning to read natural indicators with the same precision that Maya had demonstrated, developing capabilities that remained effective even when sophisticated equipment was unavailable or compromised. But perhaps the most profound impact was on the culture of elite military units themselves. Maya's story had become a powerful reminder that true professionals recognized and respected capability regardless of its source. The mockery and dismissal she had initially faced now served as cautionary examples of how prejudice and assumption could blind even experienced warriors to exceptional competence. Young soldiers entering sniper training programs were taught Maya's story as part of their professional development, learning not just technical skills, but the importance of maintaining open minds about who might possess valuable knowledge and capabilities. The lesson had applications far beyond marksmanship, influencing leadership development and team dynamics throughout military organizations. The international implications were equally significant. Military services that had historically maintained rigid hierarchies based on rank, experience, and background were discovering that exceptional capability could emerge from unexpected sources. Maya's demonstration had become a case study in military academies worldwide, used to illustrate the importance of creating environments where talent could be recognized and developed regardless of conventional expectations. As months passed, and Maya's influence continued to spread through anonymous contributions and inspiring example, it became clear that her single perfect shot had achieved something far beyond demonstrating exceptional marksmanship. She had challenged fundamental assumptions about human potential and created lasting change in how military organizations identified, developed, and utilized their most valuable resource, human capability. The rifle in its display case at Kodiak continued to draw visitors who came not just to see the weapon that had achieved the impossible, but to remember the lesson that true strength often came in unexpected packages. Maya Rodriguez had proven that the most dangerous opponents were often the quietest ones, that genuine expertise spoke through results rather than boasts, and that a single moment of perfect execution could change how the entire world understood the limits of human achievement. Her story had become more than military legend. It had become a powerful reminder that in a world quick to judge by appearances and assumptions, the most extraordinary capabilities were often hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to emerge and change everything. 5 years after the shot that changed everything, Dr. Sarah Chun sat in her office at Stanford University's Center for Human Performance, surrounded by research data that challenged every assumption about peak human capability. As one of the world's leading experts in cognitive performance under extreme stress, she had spent the last 3 years studying the psychological and physiological factors that enabled individuals to achieve what others considered impossible. Her research had been sparked by reports of Maya Rodriguez's demonstration at Kodiak, but it had evolved into something far more comprehensive. Through interviews with elite performers across multiple disciplines, from Olympic athletes to emergency room surgeons to combat pilots, Dr. Chun had begun to identify patterns that suggested extraordinary capability was far more common than anyone had realized. The breakthrough had come through her analysis of what she termed moment of revelation scenarios, situations where individuals suddenly demonstrated abilities that seemed to exceed their known limitations. Maya's perfect shot was just one example of a phenomenon that occurred across human endeavors, but which was rarely studied because it seemed to defy scientific explanation. "We've been approaching human potential from the wrong direction," Dr. Chun explained to her research team during their weekly meeting. "We focus on average performance and try to understand outliers as statistical anomalies. But what if exceptional capability is actually more normal than we assume, and our measurement methods are simply inadequate to identify it?" Her hypothesis was revolutionary. Traditional assessments of human capability relied on controlled testing environments that bore little resemblance to the complex, high-pressure situations where extraordinary performance actually occurred. By studying individuals in their natural high-performance environments, Dr. Chun was discovering capabilities that conventional testing had never detected. The research had practical implications that extended far beyond academic interest. Military selection programs, corporate hiring practices, educational assessment methods, and athletic talent identification systems all relied on evaluation criteria that Dr. Chun's work suggested might be missing the most important indicators of exceptional potential. Her team had identified Maya Rodriguez as the perfect case study for their research, but locating her had proven impossible. The same abilities that had enabled her covert military career now allowed her to maintain complete anonymity despite considerable efforts to find her. However, Dr. Chun had discovered something almost as valuable: other individuals who had experienced similar moments of unexpected excellence. Captain Lisa Morgan had been a helicopter pilot whose remarkable emergency landing in hostile territory had saved 12 lives under conditions that flight simulators suggested should have been unsurvivable. Sergeant Robert Kim was a medic who had performed complex surgical procedures in battlefield conditions without formal surgical training, achieving success rates that surprised experienced military doctors. Detective Amanda Foster had solved a series of complex cases through investigative techniques that seemed to rely on intuition rather than conventional police methodology. Each of these individuals shared certain characteristics that Dr. Chun's Research was beginning to identify as markers of hidden exceptional capability. They were typically quiet, observant people who preferred to work in the background rather than seek attention. They possessed unusual ability to remain calm under extreme pressure. Most importantly, they demonstrated what Dr. Chun termed integrated learning, the ability to synthesize knowledge from multiple sources and apply it in novel ways that exceeded what formal training alone could provide. Maya Rodriguez represents the most extreme example we've encountered. Dr. Chun noted during a presentation to military leadership at the Pentagon. But our research suggests that similar potential exists in far more people than current identification. Methods detect. We're essentially blind to a significant percentage of human capability because we're looking for it in the wrong ways. The implications of her research were staggering. If Dr. Chun was correct, military services, corporations, and educational institutions were systematically overlooking individuals who possessed the potential for exceptional performance. The economic and strategic consequences of this oversight could be measured in lost innovation, missed opportunities, and suboptimal organizational performance across every sector of society. General Hawkins, who had never stopped trying to locate Maya, found Dr. Chun's research both fascinating and frustrating. If we can identify these characteristics, why can't we develop better methods for finding people like Rodriguez before they disappear into civilian careers? That's exactly what we're working on, Dr. Chun replied. But it requires completely rethinking how we assess human potential. Traditional testing focuses on demonstrating known skills under controlled conditions. What we need are assessment methods that reveal how people perform when facing unprecedented challenges with limited resources. The conversation reflected broader discussions taking place throughout organizations that relied on human performance for their success. Maya's story had become a catalyst for fundamental reconsideration of talent identification and development practices, but implementing changes required overcoming decades of institutional momentum and conventional wisdom. Meanwhile, reports of Maya's continued activities provided tantalizing glimpses of how exceptional capability could be applied to address real-world challenges. Intelligence sources suggested she had spent time working with wildlife conservation teams in remote regions where her precision shooting skills were being used to tranquilize dangerous animals for relocation efforts. The work required the same extraordinary accuracy she had demonstrated at Kodiak, but applied to scenarios where missing could result in the death of endangered species or conservation workers. Other unconfirmed reports placed her at disaster relief operations where her ability to remain calm under extreme pressure and synthesize complex information quickly made her invaluable for coordinating rescue efforts in chaotic environments. Her military training in single-shot scenarios translated perfectly to disaster situations where resources were limited and every decision carried life or death consequences. The pattern of her activities suggested someone who had found ways to apply exceptional capabilities to purposes that aligned with her personal values. Rather than seeking recognition or financial reward, Maya appeared to be using her skills to address problems where her unique combination of abilities could make the greatest positive impact. Dr. Chun's research team had begun developing new assessment protocols based on their analysis of exceptional performers like Maya. Instead of testing individuals in controlled environments, the new methods placed candidates in complex, evolving scenarios that required rapid adaptation and creative problem solving. The results were revealing capabilities in people who had scored poorly on conventional assessments, while identifying limitations in individuals who had previously been considered high-potential candidates. The first organization to implement these new assessment methods was a federal law enforcement agency that dealt with high-stakes situations requiring split-second decision-making under extreme pressure. Within 6 months, they had identified and recruited several individuals whose performance exceeded that of agents selected through traditional methods. The success led to inquiries from military special operations commands, emergency medical services, and even technology companies dealing with complex problem-solving challenges. But perhaps the most significant impact of Dr. Chun's research was its effect on how people understood their own potential. Her findings suggested that many individuals possessed capabilities they had never discovered because they had never been placed in situations that demanded exceptional performance. The research provided scientific validation for something that Maya's story had illustrated: that extraordinary ability often remained hidden until circumstances revealed it. Educational institutions began developing programs designed to create moment of revelation opportunities for students, allowing them to discover capabilities that traditional classroom environments never revealed. These programs were producing remarkable results, with students demonstrating abilities that surprised both themselves and their instructors. The corporate world was beginning to recognize similar patterns. Companies that implemented assessment methods based on Dr. Chun's research were identifying employees whose potential had been overlooked by conventional evaluation systems. These individuals were often quiet, observant workers who had been passed over for advancement because they didn't fit traditional leadership profiles. Yet when given appropriate challenges, they demonstrated problem-solving abilities and performance under pressure that exceeded more conventionally impressive candidates. Athletic programs were also benefiting from the research. Coaches were discovering that some of their most promising athletes were individuals who had been overlooked by traditional talent identification systems. These athletes often lacked the obvious physical advantages that scouts typically sought, but possessed the mental qualities and integrated learning abilities that enabled peak performance under competitive pressure. The ripple effects of Maya's demonstration and Dr. Chun's subsequent research were creating fundamental changes in how society identified and developed human potential. Organizations across multiple sectors were discovering that their most valuable performers often came from unexpected backgrounds and possessed capabilities that conventional assessment methods had failed to detect. As Dr. Chun continued her research, she often reflected on the broader implications of what they were discovering. Maya Rodriguez had not just demonstrated exceptional marksmanship, she had revealed the existence of human capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about performance, potential, and the nature of expertise itself. The quiet woman who had walked into that Alaskan facility and changed everything with a single perfect shot had unknowingly sparked a revolution in human performance science. Her story had become more than inspiration, it had become the foundation for a new understanding of what people could achieve when their true capabilities were recognized and properly developed. In a world that was finally learning to look beyond surface appearances and conventional expectations, Maya Rodriguez had become the symbol of hidden potential that existed in countless individuals, waiting for the right moment and the right circumstances to emerge and change everything once again. The emergency call came through at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in October, 8 years after the shot that had changed everything. Detective Marcus Webb of the San Francisco Police Department's Crisis Response Unit stared at the situation report with growing dread. A hostage situation had developed in the financial district, with an armed individual holding 17 people captive on the 42nd floor of a downtown skyscraper. The tactical challenge was unprecedented in the department's history. The suspect had positioned himself with clear sight lines, covering all possible entry points, making conventional rescue approaches impossible. Worse, he had threatened to begin executing hostages if any law enforcement personnel came within 2 blocks of the building. The only viable option was a precision shot from an adjacent building, but the distance and angle made it nearly impossible. "We need someone who can make a shot at 1,847 meters, through an urban environment with multiple wind channels and no opportunity for ranging shots," explained Captain Rodriguez to the assembled tactical team. "Miss, and people die." hesitate, and people die. This is exactly the kind of scenario that requires capabilities beyond normal SWAT protocols. The team's best marksman, Sergeant Kelly Martinez, had already studied the tactical situation and reached a sobering conclusion. "Sir, I've run every calculation I can think of. The wind patterns created by the buildings, the angle of engagement, the time pressure. This shot requires capabilities that I honestly don't possess. We need someone with experience in extreme range precision shooting under operational conditions." The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of lives hanging in the balance. Traditional law enforcement training, while comprehensive, rarely prepared officers for scenarios that demanded the absolute pinnacle of precision shooting capability. The hostage-taker's position had been chosen specifically to make conventional tactical response impossible. It was Officer James Park, a young patrol officer whose quiet competence had earned respect throughout the department, who made the suggestion that changed everything. "Captain, there's someone we should contact. I don't know if she's still in the area, but about 6 months ago, I encountered an individual who might have the capabilities we need." Park had been responding to a domestic violence call in a rough neighborhood when he had witnessed something that still amazed him. A small woman had intervened in a dangerous situation involving an armed suspect, disarming him with precision and timing that suggested training far beyond civilian self-defense courses. When Park had tried to get her information for his report, she had quietly disappeared, but not before leaving an impression of competence that had stayed with him. "She didn't give me her name, but she left a way to contact her if there was ever an emergency that required specialized skills." Park continued, pulling out a business card that bore only a phone number and the words "emergency consultation" available. "I got the impression she was someone with military background who preferred to stay out of official channels." Captain Rodriguez studied the card with growing hope. In 8 years of leading tactical responses, he had learned to recognize when conventional approaches were insufficient. This situation demanded capabilities that existed at the intersection of exceptional skill and operational experience, exactly the combination that Maya Rodriguez had demonstrated at Kodiak years earlier. The phone call was answered on the second ring by a voice that was calm and professional. "This is Maya. I understand you have a tactical situation that requires specialized assistance." The conversation that followed was brief and focused. Maya listened to the tactical briefing without interruption, asked precise questions about environmental conditions and civilian safety protocols, and made her decision with the quiet authority that had characterized her throughout her career. "I can be at your command post in 20 minutes, she said simply. "Have your best spotter available and ensure that all approach routes to the target building are clear of personnel. This will require a single-shot solution with zero margin for error." 18 minutes later, a nondescript sedan pulled up to the police command post, and Maya Rodriguez emerged into the controlled chaos of a major law enforcement operation. She looked exactly as she had 8 years earlier, small, quiet, and utterly unremarkable except for the focused intensity in her dark eyes that suggested depths of experience and capability that her appearance couldn't convey. The tactical team's initial reaction was predictable. Several officers exchanged glances that mixed skepticism with desperate hope. The woman who had just volunteered to attempt what their best marksman considered impossible looked more like a social worker than someone capable of precision shooting under life-or-death pressure. But Captain Rodriguez had done his research. During the 20 minutes it took Maya to arrive, a few discreet calls to military contacts had provided enough background information to understand that the quiet woman standing before him possessed capabilities that most people would consider fictional. Her demonstrated ability at Kodiak had become legendary within certain circles, though the details remained classified. "Ma'am, I want to be completely transparent about what we're facing," Rodriguez explained as he led Maya to the tactical command center. This isn't a controlled shooting range. We have 17 innocent lives depending on a shot that pushes every boundary of what's possible in urban precision shooting. Environmental conditions are challenging, the target window is minimal, and there's no opportunity for a second chance. Maya studied the tactical maps and building schematics with the same methodical attention she had brought to every challenge throughout her career. Her questions revealed an understanding of urban shooting environments that impressed the assembled tactical officers. She considered wind patterns created by building configurations, calculated bullet trajectory through multiple atmospheric layers, and assessed angles of engagement with mathematical precision that seemed intuitive rather than calculated. The shot is feasible, she concluded after 15 minutes of analysis. But it requires positioning from the roof of the Meridian building, approximately 1,847 meters from the target location. Wind conditions are manageable if we account for the thermal effects created by the building heating systems. The angle is challenging, but within acceptable parameters. Her assessment was delivered with the calm certainty that had characterized her approach to every mission throughout her operational career. There was no bravado, no false confidence, just professional evaluation of a tactical problem that required capabilities she had spent years developing. The ascent to the Meridian building's roof took 12 minutes, with Maya carrying a precision rifle that had been selected specifically for urban long-range engagements. The weapon was a custom-built system that represented the latest advances in precision shooting technology. But in Maya's hands, it became something more than equipment. It became an extension of will and capability refined through years of experience. The tactical situation was as challenging as the briefing had suggested. The target building stood across a canyon of urban architecture, with wind patterns that changed unpredictably as air currents moved between structures of varying heights. The hostage taker was visible through a window that provided only a narrow engagement zone, while innocent civilians moved periodically through the background. Maya began her preparation with the same methodical precision that had characterized her approach to every significant shot throughout her career. She observed environmental indicators that electronic instruments couldn't measure, calculated atmospheric effects that computer models couldn't predict, and prepared mentally for the kind of single-shot scenario where failure was not an option. Sergeant Martinez, who was serving as her spotter, watched Maya's preparation with growing amazement. "Ma'am, the environmental factors here are incredibly complex. How are you compensating for variables that our computer systems can't even measure?" "Urban environments create microclimates that change constantly," Maya replied without taking her eyes from the scope. "Electronic systems are excellent for providing baseline data, but they can't account for the interaction effects between multiple buildings, heating systems, and atmospheric layers. Sometimes the most sophisticated instrument available is experience combined with careful observation." Her response revealed the depth of knowledge that had enabled her to succeed in environments where conventional training and equipment reached their limits. The technique she employed had been developed through operational necessity in situations where lives depended on capabilities that exceeded normal human limitations. As Maya settled into her final firing position, the assembled tactical team fell silent. Through radio communications, they could hear updates from the hostage situation as the armed individual grew increasingly agitated. Time was running out, and the window for a successful resolution was closing rapidly. Maya's breathing fell into the controlled rhythm that serious precision shooters use to achieve perfect stability. Her body position was textbook perfect. Every aspect of her stance optimized for maximum accuracy under challenging conditions. When she closed her eyes briefly, it wasn't from nervousness or uncertainty. It was the final mental preparation that enabled peak performance under ultimate pressure. The shot, when it came, was preceded by absolute stillness that seemed to encompass the entire urban landscape. Maya's trigger squeeze was so smooth and controlled that the rifle's report came as a surprise. even to the spotter positioned beside her. The bullet's flight time across the urban canyon was nearly 3 seconds, during which the fate of 17 innocent people hung in the balance. The confirmation came through radio communications with surgical precision. Threat neutralized. All hostages safe. Perfect shot placement. Maya remained in position for several more seconds, ensuring that the situation was completely resolved before beginning to secure her equipment. Her expression showed neither triumph nor relief, just the quiet satisfaction of someone who had executed a difficult task successfully. When she finally stood and began packing her rifle, her movements carried the same economical efficiency that had characterized every aspect of her approach. Ma'am, Sergeant Martinez said quietly, that was the most remarkable demonstration of precision shooting I've ever witnessed. The variables you managed, the pressure you performed under, how do you develop that level of capability? Maya paused in her equipment preparation, considering the question with the same thoughtfulness she brought to every aspect of her work. It starts with understanding that real capability isn't about impressive demonstrations or public recognition. It's about being prepared to use whatever skills you possess when they can make a difference that matters. Her response encapsulated the philosophy that had guided her throughout her career, from her classified military service through her anonymous civilian contributions to this moment, when exceptional capability had once again been applied to save innocent lives. As news of the successful resolution spread through the Tactical Command Center, Maya quietly completed her equipment preparation and prepared to leave as unobtrusively as she had arrived. But Captain Rodriguez had one final question that had been troubling him since he had first contacted her. Maya, if you don't mind me asking, why do you continue to take on these challenges? You could live comfortably on the recognition and opportunities that your demonstrated capabilities would provide. Why choose anonymity and the kind of high-pressure situations that most people would avoid? Maya's answer came without hesitation, revealing the core motivation that had driven her choices throughout her adult life. Because the world is full of people who possess extraordinary capabilities that they've never had the opportunity to discover or develop. Every time someone like me steps forward when it matters, it creates a little more space for others to believe in their own potential. The words carried the weight of someone who had spent years understanding that true strength often came in unexpected packages, that genuine capability was frequently hidden beneath unremarkable surfaces, and that the most important moments in life were often the ones where people chose to exceed what others believed was possible. 3 hours later, Maya Rodriguez drove away from San Francisco as quietly as she had arrived, leaving behind a successful resolution to an impossible situation and another chapter in the story that would never be fully told. The 17 people whose lives she had saved would never know her name, but they would return to their families because someone with extraordinary capabilities had chosen to use them when they mattered most. In the years that followed, Maya's story would continue to inspire changes in how organizations identified and developed human potential. Her example would encourage countless individuals to believe in capabilities they had never imagined they possessed. Training programs would evolve to recognize that exceptional performance often emerged from unexpected sources and unusual combinations of skills and experience. But perhaps most importantly, Maya Rodriguez had proven that the most powerful force in the world wasn't technology or resources or institutional authority. It was the quiet determination of individuals who chose to use whatever capabilities they possessed to make a difference when it mattered most. In a world that often overlooked quiet competence in favor of impressive presentations, she had become the ultimate reminder that true strength spoke through results, not words. The circle was complete. From a shooting range in Alaska, where she had been dismissed as irrelevant, to an urban rooftop where 17 lives depended on capabilities that seemed impossible, Maya Rodriguez had demonstrated that extraordinary potential existed everywhere, waiting for the right moment to emerge and change everything once again. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.